Hey folks, Ori here. Hope you're all well. In this video we're going to be going over 17 Sanguine Depths, just as the title suggests. So without any delay, let's just get into it and we will discuss things as we go through it. So there's going to be no rewinding. We're looking at going to try and keep this to probably about the 40-minute mark with just a little bit at the end of a quick discussion. So let's get into it and hopefully you enjoy the video. Play. So, complete pug, none of calamities present. We have 3 druids, a mage, and myself. I am the only melee DPS, so I'm kind of in a position where storming this week is only really my problem, which is good, but storming as an affix isn't exactly the most fun. So I'm running the PvP trinket at 226 item level. I haven't yet got around to trying to hit 1800. And I'm using Old Warrior's Soul, because with it being a pug, I'm expecting consistent chain pulling. Because, you know, you gotta go fast. So, this particular pack was a fairly good representation of how I felt that the dungeon was going to go. The Boomy did a considerable amount of DPS. I did pretty well, peaking at near almost 40k at the start of the pack. And the Frost Mage brought up the rear. So, pretty good pull. It was a double pull, and we do have the Venthyr buff because we do have 2 Venthyrs within the party. So, again, kind of feeling pretty strong at this point. Packs go a bit forward. There were a couple of problems, like I've already had to use my Lay on Hands to heal the Balance Druid because, unfortunately, they were clipped by one of the fences, the Mist Dancers at the start of this pack, and they really hurt, especially on Fortified Weeks. But I obviously don't need to tell you guys that. So, at this point, I'm using my 1 minute as I should. I'm kind of cycling through. I'm trying to avoid the traps. Unfortunately, our Boomy does go down. Probably got clipped by a trap or got thrown into one by the storming, which gives me Baby Wings, and Baby Wings then just finishes up the pack. You can see me kind of moving to overall data, or at least trying to. I'm currently still set to current segment, but what I'm trying to do is get myself into that point of looking at my overall damage over the course of a dungeon. Because one thing that I seem to be struggling with at the moment is bringing my overall DPS up. I can do incredibly high amounts of burst in situations, but it's trying to get that to be consistent across the entire dungeon. So at the moment, with me doing 16s, 17s, and a couple of 18s, being 7-8k DPS across the course of a dungeon isn't too bad. The best Ret Paladins out there in the world that are pushing the 23s, 24s are averaging 10 or 11k DPS. And obviously there are limitations with like how much I'm pulling or how much combat time I'm in, and just generally those kind of parameters in terms of like, okay, is the tank pulling 3 mobs or is the tank pulling 5 mobs? If the tank's pulling 5 mobs, of course my DPS is going to be higher. But I can still look at it and work from a pack-to-pack basis or a dungeon-to-dungeon basis with different tanks and be like, right, okay, this went well, this was my average DPS here, and that is how I've improved from having kind of like a 5.5k average DPS to kind of the 7k, close to 8k mark. And I think at the end, we actually end up higher than average for this particular dungeon, which is quite good, but it was also kind of a cluster dungeon. Like this pull for the Incinerator, for instance. I was expecting the Incinerator to be pulled earlier, so I Seraphimed where I thought the natural progression of the pull was going to be. Unfortunately, it wasn't, which meant that I actually only got 3 seconds worth of my Seraphim for this pull, which really hurt. However, because I had all my other cooldowns and I was prepared to go and still went, I am responsible for doing a substantial portion of this particular guy's health as the damage. I was pretty much the only DPS to work because both our Boomy and our Mage went down. And this is kind of where the pugs become a problem. Because you can't coordinate kicks on Incinerator, you just have to guess. And unfortunately that resulted in us overlapping our kicks, because both myself and the Druid melee kicks, realistically the 2 of us should alternate. And we should have communicated in party chat, but we didn't. Which meant that both our Mage and our Druid panicked, but the Mage has a 24-second interrupt, and the Boomy has a 45-second to a minute silence. So, as a result, once all 4 kicks were used, we just, yeah, we were screwed. But we managed to survive. and we cracked on because I used Health Pot and my Kyrian Vial. So this here's actually an interesting thing in terms of, you can see that I go into my 1 minute, but I do not use Execution Sentence. I held Execution Sentence because I did not think I would get the benefit from it on the Gluttonous Ticks. Because generally, when I run with Calamity or other groups, these Gluttonous Ticks go down so incredibly quick because of the fact that you need to kick them, and every time they get a cast off, they get a stack, so when they do detonate and die, they do increase the amount of damage. So you can see there that that Gluttonous Tick doesn't get kicked. I don't kick it thinking that someone else is going to do it. Again, should have been more proactive. That is a fault on my half. But you see that my Lay on Hands comes out. And this is why Healing Hands is useful. Because we haven't even reached the first boss yet. We're less than 10 minutes into the timer, and I've already had 2 Lay on Hands out, saving myself and another member of the party immediately. Shouldn't have been needed, because I should have made that kick, but that's what the talent's there for. So this particular pack went a bit awry. Again, that situation where I don't use Execution Sentence when I should have done because I am trying to do everything else in AoE. This is the kind of situation in which Zeal is much better. And in hindsight, Zeal may have actually netted me more benefit over the course of the dungeon. But at the time, looking at the pug and what we had, I thought that I'd have to play the middle ground. And when we go on to the first boss, Craxus, we will see that I am the middle ground. And we'll explain that during the boss fight. But as you can see, I didn't use Execution Sentence, and I could have fitted in. I could have fitted it on, say, the Brute, because the Brute's at 50% health. I'm about to go down because I don't have Word of Glory. I don't have Word of Glory. I don't have my Healing Pot because it was already used, and I didn't have Lay on Hands. I could have bubbled, but I was reserving bubble for the boss because I don't know this healer, and I am trying my best to mitigate dangerous parts of the fight. So unfortunately this is a wipe and quite a long run back. But I'm not too worried. It's the start of the dungeon. We don't have any emergency levers, and here I realise that I'm still on current segment for the fight for damage overall rather than overall, like over the course of the dungeon so far. And at this point I'm looking and seeing, right, okay, I'm 9.1k DPS overall. That's not bad. Could be higher. So I'm starting to think, right, okay, how can I make it higher? And this is where, well, I didn't use Execution Sentence. I need to try and be on top of that. So I eat my food buff here because I know that we're just going to go for, we're going to hold cooldowns for the boss. Realistically, one of us as DPS should have popped our cooldowns to get this through faster, but we didn't because, again, pug mentality, we're all kind of just... We're trying to push the big numbers where it matters. Generally, people care about bosses or they care about big ad packs. A single lone mob really isn't that interesting to push CDs on. So you can see here that I am only just scraping above the tank. But it's allowing things to tick over, and also, byproduct of it, because I'm using Old Warrior's Soul, the longer this combat is, because we're going to go straight into the next pull fairly quickly, we can stack up the haste to get the most benefit from it. So consider it like a warm-up mob. Does kind of waste a little bit of time, but means that we have access to that haste much sooner, and we're at that theoretical 21.5% haste breakpoint for the extra global with an Execution Sentence, which you see that I utilize on here at the start of the pull, nearly hitting 30k DPS, single target, in the opener with my wings. Now, this is why we were discussing about the middle ground, because you can see that my burst is now over. Wings has expired, and the Boomy is now having their burst. Venthia Boomies will essentially ramp into their burst at about the 30-second mark. 20-second to 30-second mark. And as I'm dropping, you now have someone else take the lead. This was also discussed in my Necrotic Wake video, except we had a Shadow Priest then, rather than a Frost Mage. And our Frost Mage is kind of more AoE focused, because they're pulling up the rear in terms of single target DPS. Which is fine. More than fine. Because end of the day, this is what you're supposed to do over the course of a dungeon. You're supposed to spread your DPS out so you can do things. You've got that person that can pump the single target. You've got that person that can, you know, clap ass cheeks and go through AoE mobs like it's going out of fashion. And then you have your guy in the middle that does a bit of both. Some weeks you will actually have more AoE done, others you'll want more single target, but that's a week-to-week basis and something for you guys to assess as you go through it. Now, I used my 1 minute towards the end of the boss fight trying to wrap that up sooner. If I was being wise about it and wanted to pad the DPS somewhat, I would have held my 1 minute for this particular part of the dungeon, because generally this ends up being a double pull. And had I used Final Reckoning Execution Sentence here onto a priority mob and helped burn it, we would have been in a much better position. Because unfortunately we do have a lot of kicks that need going out. And I don't actually think Solar Beam was used on these mobs. I would go back and check. Like, I see the cooldown having been used, but I don't recall it being as impactful when he used it. Because now would be a good time. Mobs are starting to die, we're about to get bursting, Curse of Corruption's going out, and the dispels aren't happening either. Like, we have 3 druids that can remove curses. It ain't... Or rather, we have a mage, sorry, that can remove curses, and isn't. So, having the curse be a silence effect really isn't helpful to our healer. Or our Boomy, for that matter, because our Boomy is actually doing a substantial amount of damage as well. But, single target's back, my 1 minute, so I just go through it and deal with the Sentinel. Ideally, the Sentinel would have been pulled into the Executioner, so our Frozen Lich Boy. But some groups don't, and they prefer to take the Sentinel on their own because people cannot get out of the ground effects in time due to the snare. But we take the Sentinel in just at the last minute. I give myself freedom so I can get out of things, because obviously 50% snare. Now, for the druids, that's not really a problem because they can shapeshift. Now, I'm taking a lot of unnecessary damage here and not receiving much healing until I dipped. I did use a potion to bring my health back up slightly, and that's when I then got the defensives and the healing. But initially, I was a little bit behind. Now, I used my sacrifice here as a damage reduction on the mage because I see that the healer is running low on mana, and generally the healer seems to be struggling at this priority healing, which some druids do struggle with. They don't run the build for it. They kind of just want to blanket everybody, and they expect you guys to look after yourselves somewhat. And as a paladin, we have that spot healing or damage reduction utility. A side note on the damage reduction utility, maybe for this dungeon what I should have been doing is running Devotion Aura rather than Retribution Aura, purely because of the utility that is the DR, rather than if someone dies, me getting wings. Now, here's a pack that could have gone very, very well. Unfortunately, it was a monumental hoof up. We didn't have any cooldowns at all. I had wings, but I still had 8 seconds on everything else. And the tank just went. The group was not ready for it. Again, this is one of the key things about communications and why pug groups can be so difficult. Had we waited 30 seconds or 20 seconds, that could have been alright. But unfortunately, it was a complete wipe. We didn't get anything killed, and we also wasted a Venthia pot. Really not good. So, we gather up. We get ready. The tank just does not give a monkeys and just runs straight back into the pack. Which is fine. It's his prerogative. So, we've lost the use of the pot. We just go into it. Now, yeah, you can see here that I'm winding up to just burst. So I use everything. I should have used Steed, because I still had it. Because I was running Cavalier this dungeon rather than Unbreakable Spirit. But I should have just gone to town. Now, this is something that I need to work on personally. And as a Kyrian, I need to get used to playing the minigame of collecting orbs for the extra mastery and prolonging that buff. Unfortunately, though, I still let it slip from time to time. Should have been a little bit faster there, getting out. Like, I can see the cast. I need to get a certain distance away, because the thing is, if you can get to about the 20-yard mark, the chains will immediately drop off. And if you do it fast enough, you won't actually get them. Because you take a lot of unnecessary damage with chains, and this druid is proving to struggle in places. So I'm 10 seconds off my 1 minute cooldown, so we're going into this next pack, and I'm kind of thinking, do I hold it now, or are we going to go to the left here for that AoE pack? You can see there that my Dread Binding's reaction time was much, much faster. And that's how it needs to be generally, because I took a lot less damage. I have also sacked the tank, because he has 3 dots. Or 3 debuffs on him. Using Uncivil Etiquette to increase my damage on the Overseer, because again, while the Overseer is up, you actually do less damage and less healing, because they have a oppressive aura. Curse of Suppressions. I got the stun off on that oppression. Could have kicked it, but thought to use the stun instead. And here we've got 20 seconds to, well, nearly 30 seconds to wait until cooldowns. Now, the tank is obviously umming and ahhing about what to do. I believe at this point the healer actually called mana, so is sat drinking a little bit. Which is fine, because this is giving my cooldowns time to tick back. And because the group seems to be struggling with the Overseers, I have decided this time that I am going to burst this particular Overseer. So, everything comes back, and I'm about to go to town. Frostmage is kind of doing his business at the moment, and then I decide that I want to play. I bubble these Dread Bindings because I just do not want to play around, and I want this thing dead. Which ends up netting us that 20k DPS, and this Overseer taking 16k execution sentences and just generally getting his rear end torn a new one. So I'm debuffed here. We go into the next pack. In terms of cooldowns, the Druid has cooldowns. The Mage has just popped his cooldowns as well. So we're kind of leapfrogging our cooldowns now, which is a really good situation to be. Now here, I made a misplay. I bopped for no apparent reason. I think at the time I went to either WOG or Shield of Vengeance, not realizing that my Shield of Vengeance was already on cooldown and had about a minute left to go. The other reason I could have bopped potentially is I thought I saw threat problems kicking up, but I wasn't actually bursting that hard. I was doing the same DPS as the tank. So again, misplay on me, especially seeing as that the next guy we're about to go into is the big boy with the bleed. So Bob would have been much more beneficial had I have held it. But that can't really be helped. So, no real problems to speak of here. We don't ninja pull anything. I managed to pick the orbs up. And I also have the strength bonus from Remnant of Doubt going into this. We've managed to also keep our haste relatively high because we're at 4 stacks of Old Warrior's Soul, which is good. So, Executor Vareth, I stand on the tank to avoid the AoE fear, Carnage goes out, and this is where Bop would have been really handy, because that mage was able to ice block that one, which is fantastic, but we won't be able to ice block the next. I also don't have Bubble, so if it's on me, we're in a position where I have to carry and Vial in order to make the healer's life easier, but I can't use my utility to protect anybody else. So, the next fear goes out, I'm still stood on the tank. Now, the Boomy runs out, and is now in a position where a lot of healing needs to be done. Now, I could have bopped at that point, but as I said, I wasted it. Now, because we're holding, I'm holding cooldowns. I should have probably used them earlier, but unfortunately, I thought it wiser to hold them for the next pack. This is where the pull gets interesting, because none of this was communicated. I'd like to reiterate that none of this was communicated. So, I think. Right, okay, we're gonna go, we're pulling to the Vial. Hold my cooldowns for a second. Wait, we're not going to the Vial, we're backing up. Why are we backing up? Sod it. I've decided I was going to use Wings here, I'm using Wings on the Warden. So, we're now in this really narrow corridor. There's a lot going on. We've pulled a Chamber Sentinel, we've pulled the Warden, we've got multiple casters going off, and I'm really, really struggling to see where I need to stand in order to stay alive. Because I can't see anything at this point, and everyone's going down. I stood in fire at this point, get thrown up into the air by a storming, and I just die. I do get a combat res, which is great. I wait a moment, accept, and then get back into the fight. But tanking in that particular part of the corridor, really bad. What the tank should have done, if he was going to do this, was pull further into the room we've just been fighting in to give us more space to move around. Because as a melee DPS, obviously I need to be in there to fight. But with storming, the various ground effects, the Sentinel's craggy fractures, we end up in this horrible, horrible position. To the point where the tank went down, and we're now kind of fighting. Like, the Trents have aggro, the Trents are about to die, and I'm the one that then picks up aggro. Because the Trents die, and I get the Severing Slice. That Severing Slice, had the mob not died, would have done a significant amount of damage to me and probably killed me. And unless obviously I carry Inviled, because the benefit of that is obviously it removes debuffs. So we go into the next pack. I've still got 30 seconds on my 1 minute, and I'm just kind of generally trying to now plan out where best to use these cooldowns, because I've got no idea what the tank's going to pull. Because we need them for Torvald or Tarvold, because that is a very, very, very high healing requirement fight for what it's worth. That was a very, 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 very late shield on my part, like to the point where I was actually dispelled. So the healer was on top of that, and then I bobbled. So I wasn't really playing at my best here. My overall DPS though, 8k, so it's kind of working. It seems to be a trade-off of I'm doing good DPS, but mechanically I am performing poorly. Now, by this point in the dungeon, because we've had 15 deaths, I am wondering whether or not we're going to get this timed, or even if it's physically possible at this point. Because obviously we have the Gauntlet to do. Now, we have the situation where the tank is using a room that he's cleared out to collect everything up near this Venthier ability, which is fantastic. But again, needs to be something that's communicated. So we've got these kicks going off, we've got Remnants of Furies, we've got Warden as well in here, the Barb Shards. I realise that I can get to it and kick it, but it's a bit of a mess. And we're trying very, very hard to keep them near the Anima Cypher in order for thing. Now, one benefit of having a Paladin here is when those Barb Shackles go off, you can actually completely free them off, which removes the snare effect, but also removes the bleed component to it. So you can completely negate the effect, a bit like the final boss of Necrotic Wake, if you're fast enough. But you can't always rely on it. So it's just an extra bit of utility that you can have. Ideally you want to kick it, but that can't always be helped. Now, again, this is a bit of a double pull. I do have my 1 minutes coming back up, and I think I used them. Yeah, I do. I used my 1 minute on the Chamber Sentinel to prioritize him. So we end up in this position where I'm kind of hoping I haven't messed up. When I was doing this off stream, I was genuinely concerned I wasn't going to get my cooldowns back in time. Because we pretty much always pop Lust on Executor Tarvold, just because of how healing heavy he can be, especially when the ads spawn and you've got the various debuffs going out, you've got movement, and you've got to play flipping cha-cha slide hokey cokey. But anyway. So I realised that I wasn't far out with 20 seconds behind. So I'm probably going to get the first ad because Castigate is now out. The ad's about to spawn. I've got 10 seconds. Coalesce Manifestation. And you can see that I'm kind of AoEing a little bit. A couple of Divine Storms, and we go into it. So, Wings, Final Reckoning, Execution Sentence, and go to town. Castigate here is on me, and I'm trying very, very hard to avoid the storming and the crap that's on the floor, and we just go into it. At this point, I am also kicking myself because, obviously, I pre-used Bubble. So, I'm really, really hoping that RNG doesn't decide that it wants my rear. Another Manifestation, I get hit by a storm. But the storming seems to have the desired effect of actually booping me up and round. I used to lay on hands on myself to keep myself alive, making use of that utility and the reduced cooldown, because it's a 4-minute cooldown now. And second cast gate on me. I do have Shield of Vengeance that I can use if needed, but I just commit and the boss goes down, which is good. Nothing really of note happens in this next segment, so we'll move forward slightly, because this is just your standard trash. A couple of kicks. There was a little bit of indecision in terms of which side we were going, but eventually the tank decided, and we do Sogadon last. Now, generally what probably should have been done is you take one side, deal with Sogadon, and then just go do the other side. It makes things a little bit easier and less time-consuming. But, again, it's up to your tank. Because you could do that to save time for cooldowns. And on the topic of cooldowns, I should have probably used my 1 minute, because I would have had time to get them back had I used them at the start of the fight. But by this point, I'm kind of going, I could have done. And instead of just like, right, well, it's too late now, just hold them for the boss. So that's what I do. At this point, I'm feeling a little bit more confident that we might actually time it, because we're getting the bosses down pretty quickly. And obviously going from Executor Torvald to Grand Proctor is very, very short. So I'm kind of thinking, well, we've got 12 minutes, 2 bosses. Yeah, we could do this. And here's another thing. Like, because I was expecting a fast pull, I pre-Seraphim. Like, I am trying to go, 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 go. And in a coordinated group, that mentality is probably a really good thing. Obviously, I need to remember to pick the Anima Orbs up. But just because, you know, timer versus having to stop still for 5 seconds to cast. Like, which power do you want? I don't care. Just give me the one. Like, because let's be fair, Stone Ward is the only one you're picking there as a DPS. Now, this particular fight I find is a bit of a problem. I have to bubble there because I committed a direction, and that direction then decided to cough me off one. Which isn't good, because that means I cannot now immune a cast like I would normally. Which would enable other people to pick up 4 orbs rather than 3. We end up in this situation where we're kind of screwing each other over. So I am getting ready to lay on hands or sacrifice somebody, and I believe the mage is about to get a... Nope, there we are. Lay on hands on the boomy, and a wog on the healer. Now, this is the thing. Word of Glory with healing hands can be a very, very strong heal. Like, I've healed for 30, I think my highest Word of Glory heal in a dungeon of late has been about a 32k heal, which is a substantial amount of someone's health. But that does come at the cost of damage. So, you need to be very, very careful how you use your Word of Glories. Now, one thing to note with this Endless Torment, and it may be something that you guys have picked up on in your own dungeons, is sometimes they do not spawn where they look like they're spawning. You can get hidden ones that are actually spawning under the floor, but will still one-shot you, so you have to be very, very careful as a melee DPS not to stand just on the edge of one, because for all you know, there may be 2 stacked on each other in a Venn diagram kind of way, and you just get one-shot. I hate the ability with a passion. Now, the mage is about to go down, but thankfully we committed. Probably shouldn't have, because we're kind of getting desperate and a bit greedy here, but it kind of paid off, thankfully, because we can't afford these 5-second timers now. So Beam came in, grouped everything up. Probably would have beamed a little bit later, personally, but it worked out fine. Me and the mage pop our big cooldowns, and we just blow everything up. The druid still has 30 seconds on, well, 20 seconds on their cooldowns, so I'm hoping that they have something for the next pack. Because at this point, we're looking at this next pack that's relatively troublesome. The Gauntlet, which is either, at this point, going to go fantastically without a hitch, or it's going to go horrendously badly. But I'm trying not to focus on that at the moment. I'm focusing on the Overseer, and trying not to get hit by the Regal Mist Dancer. I get my strength from my boy, and I avoid the Mist Dancer barely. We're in a position where the Boomy is burning their cooldowns, but is very static in the process. Now, obviously, Dread Bindings needs to be removed. Again, should have been faster on that. Need to work on that. And we just generally avoid everything else. So, Gloom Burst, Echoing Thrust is out. And the Overseer should go down in a second. Tank is getting absolutely slapped. But now we get to focus on the Mist Dancer. I get hit with a Severing, so I must have taken aggro from the tank at some point, because that is now only a tank mechanic. That is not a cleave like it used to be. So I'm there kind of going like, what the hell just happened there? And I must have just raped aggro. So I'm kind of kicking myself because I've wasted 5 seconds. The Druid goes down to an Echoing Thrust, because the Mist Dancer didn't go down in time. So that's 10 seconds on this that we can't really afford to waste. But the Sentinel's about to go down, and I'm going to open up with cooldowns and bubble if I need to, because we want to get this Gauntlet down as quickly as we can. So, 7-10. Gauntlet and Carl to do. Can we do it? Well, we're about to find out. Tank's kind of pulling them all over the shop, so I stand still and try to get everything. I've bubbled so as to avoid as much threat as physically possible while I go through my wings and my burst. Now, the Frost Mage has held on to his Venthyr mirrors for quite some time now, and I don't know why. Here's a point that I should have been wary of, with it being the Gauntlet. I should have bubbled towards the end of that pack, because we had 6 stacks of bursting. Unfortunately, I don't know which of these packs burst and which do not. I had thought that with the Gauntlet being the way it is, that the first pack would not burst and it would be every subsequent pack that was on its own. But no. Thankfully though, our healer kept us alive and is at 50% mana. So kind of playing defensively, trying to avoid the stormings and anything unnecessary. Tank is taking a lot of damage at this point, but has managed to kind of sustain himself, and Squall's about to come out. Healer's in trouble, so I lay on hands the healer. Healer immediately then goes back down, so my lay on hands obviously kept him alive and was what was needed, but still, it's quite scary to see when you lay on hands and then immediately see your healers back at where they were before you lay on hands them. But it's fine, because pod is still available for our healer. Now we go into the next pack. We have a full 10 stack duration, and our tank is trying to force the boss down the road as quickly as they can. This does kind of cause a few problems in terms of percentaging and leashing backwards and forwards, but generally this was just go, 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 go. So my second pair of wings is used during the Gauntlet phase, along with all my other 1 minute, and we force it. Thankfully, Execution Sentence did proc beforehand, or did go off. So we're going to the next pack. We've got 17 seconds left of the Venthyr thing, and this is the last pack to the Gauntlet. So it's kill the Sentinel, avoid everything on the floor, avoid the storming, and this is just GG. We've got through the hard part on the healer. Stack goes onto the tank, along with the damage reduction from the Aegis, just to smooth things out, and we just DPS as per normal. Nothing too much to talk about here. But you can see that mistakes are starting to be made because we're looking at the time more than anything else. This is where that mentality of less haste, more speed comes into it. So rather than making unnecessary mistakes, you should be more efficient. So, like, the Sentinel currently has a damage reduction. I can't dispel it with my Blood Elf Racial. Someone else should have done it. And that mage did spell steal it in the end, but it was up for too long. Should have been dispelled almost immediately. We now have just over 3 minutes, and we've got this pack to do and the boss. Now, it's a non-tyrannical week, so this boss can go down within that time, as long as people don't make mistakes. And unfortunately, I am about to make a mistake. I get hit by a storming and then immediately land in a trap. I've just cost 5 seconds that we do not have at this stage. And that is going to come to play a part in what's about to happen next. Because I haven't said whether we time this key or not yet. And you will find out at the end of the key just how close it was. That doesn't mean to say that we timed it. We could have out-timed it. But it was close either way. Extremely close. I tried to refresh my Vial of Serenity. I go to eat a food buff, but realised that we don't have the luxury for that. We have 2 minutes to down this boss, which for a 17 fortified is pushing it a little bit. We pop everything. We have a proper Hail Mary attempt. Now, that Cavalier was early. I was trying to get it to a point where I had the Cavalier to be able to avoid the bleed. Because you can move out of... If you move out of her melee range before she connects with you, you can just avoid the bleed. Which means that the healer didn't have to heal and could in fact be helping with the DPS. Because you can see at this point that the healer is trying with the DPS and has 3k. I have bubbled and bopped the healer so the healer can just continue to DPS outside of hotting the tank. So, we got 50 seconds left. The boss is at 56% health. This is proper scratchy bum time. I'm looking at trying to avoid taking damage, but at the same time I'm trying to find a way to eke out as much damage as I can for the group. So if I stand in something for an extra hit, is it worth it? Like, can I survive? Am I going to be doing damage? Now, at this point, I believe I also started throwing out Word of Glories to try and keep the group alive because I refused to have anyone die. There's the Lay on Hands immediately on the mage, and we just time it. Like, we timed it by... 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Less than 5 seconds to go. It was close. It was close, and it had no right being that close at all. But there were some good takeaways from that. Mechanically, very, very poor on my part. But we did finish the dungeon with an average DPS of 8.4k, which in a coordinated group, I could probably get that to about 9k, which means that we're only a k to, well, yeah, we're only between about 1 and 2k DPS behind what we need to be in order to push 20 keys. Now, whether we get that through changing our trinkets around, like using the Eye of the Jailer trinket for more mastery over the warrior's soul and having more haste on our gear, I don't know. And that's something that will come with practice as we go through more and more keys. But yeah, so 17 timed Sanguine Depths chat through that had no right being as tight as it was, but we timed it, thankfully, and has been on the cards for me to do for quite some time, because I do also have a 19 Sanguine Depths, but that is that's about a month old now. If you guys want me to review it, please comment below, let me know, and I will review it, because I still have it saved somewhere, and I believe it's saved on Twitch as well, so there's that. In the meantime though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will catch you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for tomorrow's stream on the 26th of September 2021. But please bear in mind that that stream will be about half an hour late, because I do have a meeting, so it will be roughly 7:30 British time, or 8:30 server if you're European, where we'll be going live. I will catch you all then, and I hope you take care.